Hi everybody, before we get into this next episode, I just wanted to say a few words about our sponsor. We are absolutely delighted to have this episode sponsored by sportingbounce.com. This is a trusted directory connecting you with qualified and in-training sports psychologists across the UK and Ireland. So if you're looking to improve performance, boost confidence, manage pressure or support well-being in sport, you'll find the right professional there. You can search by location, sport or specialism and even choose between face-to-face or online sessions. Really importantly, every psychologist listed is verified and working to recognise professional standards, so you know you're in good hands. Take the next step with your sporting success. Visit sportingbounce.com and connect with sports psychologists who can help you unlock your full potential. That's sportingbounce.com, sportingbounce.com, helping athletes perform better, feel better and thrive. We hope you enjoy the episode, guys. Hello everybody, welcome back to Rationally Speaking. This is a show where me and my colleague Stuart Carrington talk about REBT and we sort of apply it to as many things as we can find.
And hopefully you enjoy all of the podcasts that we're going to record today. We're at the University of Gloucestershire, so big thank you to Dr. Jordan Wintle for allowing us to use his facilities. It allows me and Martin to get in the same room. We think it helps the recording, helps the conversation flow a little bit better. And of course, it's such a treat for Martin to get to be in my presence.
It's just a rare opportunity, really.
It is, yeah.
To be in the same physical space as you.
Well,
so try and take as many of those opportunities as I can.
You're only human.
I know.
A fallible human.
Yeah, that's it.
Which we'll discuss today.
Yeah. There is a tendency for us to look at the laptop.
And not the camera.
The camera, yeah.
So should we be looking at the camera or the laptop?
I don't know. We rarely address the camera.
I think we should be more focused on each other.
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
And then occasionally, I guess.
Yeah, when we're promoting
it's a bit
things. Like when we promote stuff, like the Rational Practitioner, available in all... we can address the camera in that way. Okay, cool. So last time we were together, we covered quite a bit of stuff. And we've been throwing around ideas, haven't we, around what we could talk about. And one of the things that we talked about ages ago was, why don't we go through some kind of interesting / seminal papers. There's a new one that we're going to talk about, which I think is really interesting and will help us to discuss the concept of unconditional self-acceptance. And then we've got an oldie, which is essentially, doing my maths right, is it 40 years older?
Right. So, I mean, it's 30.
50 years older.
What, the Ruth one?
Well, the Ellis one.
Oh, the Ellis ones, yeah.
1975.
50. Yeah, 50, yeah.
Yeah, 50 years old. So we're going to talk about a 50-year-old paper and a paper that came out pretty recently, just in the past couple of years. So yeah, I think we're gonna just not necessarily do like a paper analysis, are we? It just flags up interesting ideas and interesting themes that are probably worth talking about, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think the benefit of looking at an actual paper and like kind of drawing out points is, one, you get to see these kind of universally shared opinions upon topics such as universal self-acceptance. But Martin and I were talking before about saying how this notion of universal self-acceptance, it kind of creeps into all the work that we do in REBT. Often when we speak to clients or other practitioners, it's very common that, okay, so this might be an acceptance kind of feature, particularly when looking at problem solving. And yet people always kind of go to the elegant solution immediately, go straight into the D and go straight into how do I challenge that belief, rather than maybe actually sort of philosophical change as opposed to cognitive change.
Yeah, and I think certainly unconditional self-acceptance is on the philosophical end of REBT, isn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely is. I find when you're working with certain individuals, cognitive change is good, but there needs, one of the wonderful things about REBT is that flexibility to say, well, actually, maybe we can kind of challenge this philosophical schema that you may have.
Yeah, and it's a schema that I think is learned. I think we learn this. One of the papers that we'll discuss, which is from Ellis in 1975, called The Biological Basis for Human Irrationality. I suppose he makes the case that there is an innateness about our irrationality. Yes, we can learn and unlearn it, but there isn't an innateness about it. But I would argue that unconditional self-acceptance seems to me to be something that feels more learned to me. Like you learn that your worth is contingent upon the things that you do. Through different teachings, through how people interact with you, through how they treat you on the basis of your behavior, that you kind of you build that schema, as you said, and that becomes something that you then reinforce. So I think we'll talk about Ellis's ideas in a bit, but if we just kick off on this paper on unconditional self-acceptance. So this is a paper called Decoding Unconditional Self-Acceptance, a Qualitative Report. So it is technically, I suppose, a research paper, but we're not going to talk about data analysis or data. It just flags up some really interesting ideas. And it's by Pramanik and Kuntia. I hope I've pronounced those words correctly. And this was published a couple of years ago. And this is something that I've been interested in for a while. In how do we define unconditional self-acceptance? I think that we see acceptance as a word used across lots of approaches. Clearly, acceptance and commitment therapy is key in that, obviously. Carl Rogers spoke about self-acceptance. He talks about unconditional positive regard. So it's something that has been discussed across different sort of types of psychotherapy and psychology. This paper highlights how there's roots in Buddhism. So it's something that's been around for a while, but REBT has a particular position on it, doesn't it, really?
What I like about REBT's position on it, and I hope this is kind of the direction you're going, because when we talk about self-acceptance, the unconditional self-acceptance that perhaps Rogers kind of advocated suggests that there's this passive kind of, it is what it is, and there's nothing I can do about it, and everything's okay. And I think sometimes, particularly in the field that we tend to work in, which is more sports and performance environments, people might be a little bit, well, actually, like, I do care about this, like, this is important to me. And so if we're kind of encouraging somebody, particularly if they're like feeling some sort of discomfort about something, and we're asking them just to accept this and just
passively.
Accept, And that's the word I've written down here, passive acceptance. I don't think REBT pursues that. I think it encourages what we might label as active acknowledgement. So we acknowledge that this may be undesirable and somewhat discomforting, uncomfortable, and we might want to try to do things to change it, but at the same time, those things don't contribute to our worth in either direction.
I think that the active acknowledgement piece is really, really key, and that's how I try to think about this more. We'll see what the guys say in this paper, but I think they do land sort of in that position. The first thing I wanted to highlight really is literally the first two lines of the abstract, and I wanted to discuss this with you initially. So it says, unconditional self-acceptance, or USA, is a philosophy practiced to avoid the consequences of self-esteem. So there's quite a bit to unpack in there. It's a philosophy. So it comes back to what we just spoke about, essentially. There does seem to be, you do seem to land in the philosophical realm when you talk about unconditional self-acceptance, partly because you're taking a position on the self and others and possibly the world. So you can extend unconditional self-acceptance to acceptance of others, acceptance of life and the world and everything in each situation. So this idea that it's a philosophy, it's something that isn't just a flippant, context-specific idea. This is something you carry with you. It's a philosophy of life.
Did you want to go on, or can I jump in? The interesting, the philosophical aspect there to me as well, and I find that often this terminology and these concepts kind of boil back down to a philosophical question that sometimes people might not even be aware that they're addressing. The notion of self-esteem, and I think something here that you mentioned there is avoid the consequences of self-esteem. There's this deeper question about kind of what is self-esteem and does it exist? We know that in Ellis's 95 book, The Myth of Self-Esteem, he kind of rejects this and says this doesn't exist. This is like a concept that people have made up to provide worth or prescribe worth. I remember Martin and I had this conversation once about this, and we were saying, like, if you have a book that is a first edition and signed by the author, there's criteria there for the worth of the book. Condition of the book, is it autographed, things like this. the page is dogged, etc. We don't really have that with human beings, and not like, you know, we can argue whether we should or should not. I think REBT would postulate a bit of flexibility here and say, well, we shouldn't. Excuse me, we don't have to do it either way, and we can afford flexibility there. I think what's important here is if you kind of endorse the notion of self-esteem, you have to keep feeding it. Like, there's not one thing that, oh, I did something really good, that's me set now for 30 years. You know, it doesn't work like that. It's kind of like eating. Well, I've got to do this again tomorrow. You know, like, I have to sustain it.
Yeah.
And as fallible human beings, we're going to screw up. We're going to make mistakes. And sometimes we're not going to meet those conditions that are completely arbitrary.
Yeah.
And so consequently, that can like damage our self-worth. I wondered what your thoughts were upon that.
Well, it's a good, really good point, and I want to pick up on something they say in the paper here. They have a really nice section on this. They say it has been argued that the value derived through self-evaluation make one's sense of worth conditional. So the value derived through self-evaluation. So how do I evaluate myself? How good am I? How bad am I? Did I do something good? Did I do something bad? Makes one's sense of worth conditional. In self-esteem, people regard themselves only when they succeed and condemn themselves during failure. Therefore, it is considered conditional self-acceptance. So the problem with self-esteem, one of the problems with self-esteem for Ellis and REBT, is that it encourages you to self-rate on the basis of your behavior. So because I've acted well, I am now worth more.
Yeah.
Because I've acted badly, I'm now worth less. And then the end of that is worthlessness, not just worthless, but worthless. So in RBT, any level of self-esteem is considered dysfunctional and illogical, which can promote psychological dysfunctions. So the idea that you would endorse self-esteem or think self-esteem is a thing in of itself could be dysfunctional because it's based on some sort of lack of logic. So they take a pretty strong stance on this, that you shouldn't really drive towards increased self-esteem. This isn't something you should concern yourself with. You shouldn't be doing things in order to inflate your self-esteem, because the flip side is also true. When things don't go well, all of a sudden you have a diminished self-esteem. So USA, or unconditional self-acceptance, is set up as almost the kind of antidote to that, as a concept that we should endorse instead of self-esteem.
And I think in parallel, what this does is it kind of translates to what you mentioned previously about other acceptance. So the acceptance of other people's limitations and strengths, but also situations as well. And we see this all the time. And it's one thing that I think, well, one reason I think this is particularly flawed, or the way of thinking is flawed, I don't mean the paper, of self-esteem, is that it's really hard to define an action, a situation as good or bad.
Yeah.
So if we look at situational acceptance, I have a great example actually. So on the way up here, I was listening to an audiobook, and it's called The Racket. It's by an former Irish tennis player called Conor Nyland. And it's a really great book actually. And he's talking about this one incident that he has where he's qualifying, he's in the qualifying round for the Australian Open. And it's kind of like he's worked really, really hard to get to this point. And then he kind of blows it. And in his words, he's not aggressive enough, and he falls at that hurdle and chokes essentially. And he's like, so this is really bad, and he feels kind of crappy about himself. And then, like, later on, he's in a qualifying round for Wimbledon, and this is the one that he really, really wants. And he's in a really similar situation. And in the book, he says, I kind of remembered the mistakes that I made in the Australian Open, and I'm not going to do that again. So this time, like, even though I'm nervous, I'm going to play aggressively and kind of go for it and not be conservative. And he qualifies and goes through. And for me, this is an example of, well, how can we possibly label the Australian Open incident as a bad situation when it led to something good? Like, he learned from that, and it became a strength, like, later on. So we don't know if a situation is good or bad at any particular time. And we can kind of translate that to ourselves and our own actions. So although we might be disappointed in ourselves about a mistake we made, or, oh, I wish I could have done that better, Martin's great at these, but I often think, oh, I wish I brought this up in the podcast, or I wish I brought that up in the podcast. That's okay. Like, I'll do that again later. As a fallible human being, it didn't contribute to my worth one way or the other.
Yes,
I
yeah.
can learn from that.
You can evaluate the situation,
absolutely,
and not have to evaluate the self. You can separate those two things. There's a difference between what you experience and what happened, and you can kind of objectively evaluate that. You can subjective evaluate. You could say, well, that is inherently good or inherently bad, or you could say that's bad for me or that's good for me. But none of that means that you have to say, so I'm worse or I'm bad or I'm good. And it swings both ways, doesn't it? If you do something good, you then can't automatically say I am good.
Just because we did a good thing.
Did a good thing. I think that's often the misconception of this, that it's always on the negative side. But a global evaluation of any description is it's seen to be irrational in REBT, and we can see why.
I just want to jump in there. I think it's important to add as well, like this word flexibility. I keep coming back to this word flexibility, but it's a really appealing aspect of REBT.
Yeah.
I think some people may sort of listen to that and say, oh, well, that's like maybe what's discomforting about that, and it promotes that discomfort is, oh, actually, I quite like feeling good about myself when I do a good thing.
Yeah.
And I can't do that with REBT. Well,
but that's the allure
yeah.
of doing a good thing. It gives, we bask in that glory, and we assume in that moment that we are more than we actually are.
This and Dev, I mentioned this word can't. I can't now do that. I can't feel good about myself because I did a good thing if I kind of endorse this philosophy.
Yeah.
That's not very flexible, is it? Saying, oh, you must not do this. And that kind of is antithesis to what REBT would postulate. I know I've read somewhere, but Ellis talking about, we can kind of think about it on a scale. So, ideally, if we really want to endorse REBT, yes, we would kind of be up here and think, all right, well, I'm not going to praise myself or think I'm a good person or have lots of worth because I did something that was worthy.
Yeah.
Likewise, I'm not worthless because I did something that wasn't worthy. But, we don't have to be at the end of the scale. We can be flexible. Like, if we're here, that's okay. Like maybe we can think about this and contemplate and keep progressing.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, we're fallible human beings and we're never going to get it always right all the time.
Yeah. But we've got this bar that we can set in REBT. One of my favorite things about REBT is it gives you a bar to aim towards. It assumes that you'll never get there perfectly. And it takes that from Stoicism. You have this ideal that you can picture, visualize of how you think and behave and emote, and then you can work towards that ideal. And it's the same here. The ideal is to unconditionally accept yourself. Well, that's a bar that you've got to try and reach, but it doesn't mean say you'll actually get there ever. It's not to say that anybody can perfectly do this, but it's something we can strive towards and try to endorse in the people we interact with when we're working with young athletes, to try and encourage coaches around them not to treat that athlete as if their worth is conditional upon their performance. That's the work we can do. You know what I mean? So it's a bar we can set and work towards, which I think is important. It has practical utility. As much as we're saying it's a philosophy, it does have practical utility in the real world. It's something we can work towards, and there are behavioural correlates to it. We can see people behave in ways that endorse the idea that the better I do this thing, the more I'm worth. And the problem is with that is the reverse also has to be true in that case. And that's where the danger is, that's where the downfall is somebody then fails, then comes away from some kind of social standard or convention or expectation, and then denigrates themselves completely. Then that's a downward spiral, because if you're saying something like, I'm a complete failure, I'm completely worthless because I failed here or I let somebody down there, then it's hard to mount the self-efficacy, the self-confidence that you then need to go and perform again, or go into a new relationship or go into a social setting. So it's a deep, dark place because it's final. I'm worthless.
Yeah, it's global, it's definitive.
It's definitive, it's totalistic, which has all the hallmarks of irrationality. On that point of self-esteem, they go on to say, well, low self-esteem is associated with feelings of worthlessness, high self-esteem can increase the fear of failure. So if I assume that I do something good, so I'm worth more, then it now makes performance even more anxiety provoking, because it's not just losing the game, it's my worth that's on the line. It's part of myself that's on the line. So it makes everything more, makes everything just more personally relevant to me when it doesn't need to be. It's already important. It's already part of your career, or it's important. It's already an important goal. To then think that it's sacrificing part of your worth or value, then sort of takes it over the edge, really.
I'd love to bring in like a real example of this. I hope the listeners enjoy this. I think I see REBT everywhere, Martin. I think that's kind of like one of the. Is this the REBT in the room with you now, Stu? I see it everywhere, and I think that's actually a strength of REBT, is that it's kind of it hasn't just been plucked from anywhere. Like the clues are there. We'll talk about Buddhism in a moment in the paper, for instance. So there's a wonderful researcher, a guy called Gear Jorday, who does lots of work on in soccer, and in particular penalty kicks in soccer. Right, on what Martin was just saying. Right, so now this is kind of like personal to me, and actually, if I associate the acts with my self-esteem and me as an individual and my worth as an individual, it might inhibit or prohibit performance. Absolutely, and Jorday's work would endorse this. Wonderful research. Footballers that are placed on the Ballon d'Or list, their penalty kick success decreases after they've been recognised on that list. So we're talking elite players like Ronaldo, for instance. His success rate taking penalty kicks was higher before he won his first Ballon d'Or. And then post that, it decreased. And as a discussion point, Jorday postulates that the reason for that is because, well, now it's kind of like, I should be scoring this because I'm good, and this is what I do, and this is what I bring to the team.
Ego threat.
Exactly. But now it's like, it's actually kind of like constraining his performance.
Yeah, it's a good point, and I think that there is a reason why this is learned and why this happens, particularly in sport, and I think it's because this is from using some literature, but from my experience as well. I think it's because if, as a performance system, I can convince you to kind of fuse your identity with your pursuit. So I am an athlete, I am a footballer, this is everything I am. Then what I will get from you is motivation. I'll get your effort and your energy, your time and your attention, which is really the ultimate human currency. Effort and attention. I'll get that from you because it's not a question of whether you're going to do something or not. You will do it because it's who you are. So your motivation regulation is almost non-existent. It's automatic. Like, well, that's who I am. That's what I do.
Yeah. It's interjected.
You see what I mean? So you're going to be able to make use of a really deep reservoir of motivation and intensity and effort. If I communicate the message to you at a young age that, look, just chill on this. Yeah, it's important. You want to do it, but it's not everything you are. Then the fear is that you won't exhaust that effort and energy. And what most performance systems need is lots of motivated people to select from. And I think that's partly why it happens. It's also just something we observe in society, something you watch television, some of these talent shows or whatever it is. People are treated as if their worth is dependent upon their performance. It's how we use language as well. I am this and I am that. We describe ourselves as a total thing, and that's how we use language. And it's sloppy. And Ellis was aware of this, using things like general semantics theory. What they go on to say as well, just along this line, around the dangers of high self-esteem. Furthermore, when individuals' values depend on their accomplishments, they become less tolerant of negative feedback and criticism. So let's think about an athlete, as we often do, or any performer really. Okay. High self-esteem, greater anxiety around fear of failure. Okay, because everything is on the line. Okay, so that's not going to help. Then we have less tolerant of negative feedback and criticism. Well, good luck being an elite athlete. Without the ability to tolerate criticism and negative feedback. It's a big part of what it is to be an athlete, to the extent that positive feedback is very, very powerful, because it's I wouldn't say it's withheld purposely, but it's you doing a good job. It's part of the process of learning and developing, but a bigger part of that process seems to be, here's how you can be better. You see what I mean?
Oh, absolutely.
And part of that, even if you frame it in that way, here's how you can improve, human beings tend to see that as, well, here's me not being perfect. Here's me doing something negative. If you're not able to tolerate that, I think that's going to be very difficult to pursue sport.
Absolutely. And I think not only would I say that you're more likely to have negative feedback because the goal is to improve, and so it's kind of, there's the focus. But let's just say that you receive equal amounts. We know that human beings tend to have a negativity bias anyway, so you'll tend to gravitate and ruminate around the negative aspects. So we have to kind of, I want to say the word insulate ourselves, that might not be the right word, but certainly be more accepting of it. And interestingly, we see that in lots of work of REBT. My own work with sports officials has seen this. So we see that when officials have improved self-compassion, and with one aspect of self-compassion is self-acceptance, we know that they're much more likely to actually take on feedback and be proactive with it. So some of the sort of social validation data I have from refereeing coaches and observers is that, this referee seems to be much more proactive now, and they respond to feedback, and they're kind of helping others a little bit more. And I think that this paper would suggest that, this is derived from increased self-acceptance.
I think it's right what you say. I think if everything you are is wrapped up in what you're doing, and you do make the assumption that if I do something good, I am more than, then you have to defend yourself. You have to put the guards up. It's too dangerous for you to receive negative feedback or for you to fail, because it like I said before, it means the reverse is also true, that when I do something badly, then my worth is less, my value is less, I'm less of a person. So I have to protect that. So I'm not going to be open and accepting of negative feedback. I'm not going to see that as part of my journey. My journey is to inflate myself, as my sense of self-esteem. So there's we often talk about the downsides of sort of low self-esteem, but there's downsides to high self-esteem, and the argument here is that we should come away from the idea of self-esteem completely, and as Ellis argued, and maybe a more advantageous concept might be unconditional self-acceptance.
I like the link you mentioned previously. So I know you want to move on, but just around the general semantics theory and the I am. I think that's like one kind of very, not particularly easy, but perhaps accessible way that individuals listening might start to want to think about this. And when people say, like, I am a footballer, I am a referee, I am a musician, whatever it may be, it's like, well, Ellis argues, well, actually, no, we're not. Like, we're not anything except fallible human beings. So this kind of I am, we see this creeping into coaching more and more, by the way. We see coaches say, I don't coach footballers, I coach humans that play football. I'm not a music teacher. I teach humans who want to learn how to play the piano.
And some of this is shorthand. We're not like language police. But some of this is shorthand. But those shorthand pieces of language have implications. For a coach to look out and see humans that play sport and pursue sport, that's a healthier position to take than just seeing the athlete. It's a humanistic approach to coaching, which leads to good things.
That's where contemplation, I think, comes in, because you're absolutely right. We're not the language police, and we know that people are going to say, I'm X, or I am this.
You say somebody introduce yourself, they say, I am a lecturer, I am a this, I'm a that. That's you describing the role that you have, and it's context specific. If you were asked to say who you are in a different context, you might say something different. But it's when people really do see themselves kind of unilaterally, unidimensionally as one thing, and that's everything they are. That they are. That's where the danger creeps in, and that's where we start to see self-esteem being a problem. But also this idea around self-worth as a concept. So we spoke about this a little bit before, and the paper highlights the things that we've spoken about too. The idea that there are really two positions on this, aren't there? Do you remember what we spoke about in that regard?
When we spoke about self-worth,
Yeah.
remind me.
So we have two positions. One of them is quite extreme, and one of them is more relaxed. Okay. And I'll get to that point in the paper in a bit, but just initially, one position is to think of self-worth and to associate the idea of worth to human beings is not appropriate. Doesn't make sense to think that we're worth anything. We just are.
Oh, yeah. No, I remember.
The second position, which is a lighter position, is that we are worthwhile because we're human, because we're alive, because we exist. So the one position says, do not speak of worth or value. We are not things that can be valued, and therefore we have no worth, and that's fine. So it's impossible for your worth to be reduced or increased, because there is no worth. And the second position is, you are just worthwhile. You are valuable because you exist, and there's nothing that can be done to change that. You know. So in the paper, it kind of highlights these two positions as elegant and inelegant. So it says here, the first approach is the philosophically elegant solution to the problem of self-worth and self-esteem. Value or worth is meaningless and invalid when applied to a person's being or self. It believes the human is unique, complex, fallible, and in flux. So it's essentially saying that because you're complicated and ever-changing, then you can't fix to a position. So you can't ever say that I am a complete this or a complete that. All that you can really kind of admit to is that you are human, you're unique and complex and fallible, all the things that are kind of true about you. You cannot then say I'm good or I'm completely bad, because then you're evaluating your complete self on the basis of some good or bad behavior, presumably. Then the inelegant solution is where you're saying that you're worthwhile because you exist. So I do have worth, and that worth is on the basis of my existence. So we can talk a little bit about the pros and cons of that, but you end up at the same place, which is you don't rate yourself, your total self. You rate your behaviors, your actions, your performance, essentially. Yeah.
And I think people listening to this might hear that and then perhaps want one of us to sort of advocate a position on one of those choices. And that's not what we would do as REBT practitioners. We would simply invite the individual to kind of consider or contemplate one of those choices. And again, we can afford flexibility. They might prefer one way and then change and go to another. And that goes back to what you were saying about someone always being in flux, their beliefs being in flux, who they are is in flux. And so if they're ever changing, how can they possibly have a global evaluation of themselves? Because that situation might change, that they might change.
You're constantly changing, you're succeeding, you're failing, you're doing good things, bad things. So to fix on a position doesn't really make much sense. The dangers of fixing on a position is something we'd already kind of talked about a little bit. To go down the rabbit hole, it's sort of like, I think about it like this: like, how can you possibly mount the self-efficacy, the self-confidence to go and perform if you have the belief that you're a complete failure or you're completely worthless? How can you go into social situations and interact freely as is possible in society when you've got that hanging over your head that a misstep here will reduce your worth to some extent?
That's a key criteria, I think, of like negative unhealthy, because now it's become maladaptive. It's become unhelpful. Whereas an alternative, we're not saying, I don't think you're saying, oh, you don't ever have to not be concerned or apprehensive about something. That might happen because you're a human being. Yeah. But that can maybe more adaptive.
Yeah, that's it. So what we're not saying as well is you have to accept everything that happens to you. So one of the misconceptions here is that the unconditional acceptance is to do with the environment. It's to do with the A. That's not what RBT says, and it's not what we're saying. When we think about acceptance, we're talking about unconditional self-acceptance. It's acceptance of the whole self, despite the conditions that you find yourself in, or despite your behavior, your actions. And that's really important because, of course, you can change A. So just to remind people, RBT has this GABC framework. When our goals are blocked by an A, and adversity, our beliefs about that blockage generate consequences. Now, in that analysis, you might be forgiven for thinking, well, it's all about B then, because if I change B, then I change C. So we can just obsessively change B, focus on B, and work with B. But one of the reasons you're working with B is so that you can change your conditions sometimes, often, I would argue. So if you're underperforming and that's your A, I've performed badly, and your belief is, so I'm a complete failure, I'm a complete idiot. My work with you is, and so you feel anxious when you perform, when you feel depressed and you feel angry. My work with you isn't just to change B for the sake of it, for some sort of philosophical exercise. It's so that you can then change A and perform better. Or if you're having an interpersonal issue with somebody and they're bullying you, they're just being nasty to you, essentially, you still want to address that person's behaviour, but your motivation to do so isn't just to make yourself feel better. It's so that they stop, breaking social convention or breaking some sort of moral code. But you're doing that from a position of strength if you're doing it rationally. So instead of going into that interaction, let's say that my A is Stu is bullying me in the workplace. And my B is, and that means I'm a weak, stupid idiot, and I'm completely unlikable.
Yep.
And my C is that I'm depressed and I'm, extremely sad about this. But I'm also really angry at you. You know what I mean? I'm thinking, what do we do with this anger? Now, say I come to address it with you and you don't change, then this is going to end up in an altercation and possibly violence, possibly aggression. But if I change my thinking to be, well, it doesn't mean that I'm worthless or it doesn't have anything to say about my worth, it doesn't mean I'm weak or stupid or a loser, then I can approach you more forthrightly and assertively without things spilling over into aggression. So I can seek to change A through first changing bits and pieces of myself. I'm putting myself in a better position to change A. So it's not in REBT that we're saying never change A and just accept any A that's thrown at you because it's how you believe that causes the consequence. We're saying that, of course, you can approach A, but you're better off approaching A from a position of rationality, from a position of unconditional self-acceptance. That's going to put you in a better position to experience healthy negative emotion that is geared towards goal fulfillment and addressing that situation.
And that stems from self-acceptance, because that stems from however this person is treating or speaking to me, I still accept myself. It doesn't mean I'm worthless because that person doesn't respect me or is being nasty to me. And I think this is the importance of self-acceptance. And I see this really frequently. And I find often like REBT practitioners might want to kind of jump straight to the B without addressing the philosophical change around self-acceptance. How this person is treating you does not reflect on your worth as a human being. It doesn't promote it, doesn't demote it, because it, like we've mentioned before, it's just true that you're just a fallible human being. And that's what we are. So by kind of promoting that philosophical change, I love this term, like you can come at it from a position of strength. And I guess what some people might now think is, oh, but Stu might not change, Martin. Like so you're very rational about this. You're very mature. You've spoken to him in a calm manner, and then she's like, "Oh, shut up, Martin. I don't want to listen to you. I'm going to carry on behaving how I'm behaving." So, what might the rational response be to that?
Well, remember, what's the motivation here? The motivation is well-being and managing my emotion. So now, even if you don't change, at least I won't be suffering as much as I would be.
So we've dialed it down.
Well, not only have you dialed it down, you've changed the emotion from unhealthy to healthy. So you will continue to do what you're doing, but I won't suffer as much in response to what you're doing, and it won't affect me as much because I've separated what you do from the effect it has on me. I've separated A and C with B. What you will hear people often say is, "Oh, it makes me feel worthless when they treat me that way." So there's two mistakes there. One is AC thinking, that somebody makes me feel anything. And the second is the worthlessness that there's nothing anybody can do that can diminish your sense of self-worth. because it's not conditional. So you're in a better position to cope with what they're doing. You can attempt to change it, and if they don't change, at least you can still cope. There's no reason to necessarily be around people that you don't enjoy being around. There's choices to be made. There's always choices to be made, and often I spoke about this with people who are in jobs they don't like, and it's like, well, I don't want to leave because I'm earning a living and this is what I do. Okay, well, you have to find a way to cope then. You see what I mean? It's like, well, you can change the A and leave and find another job and do something you prefer to do. Well, I don't want to do that because of X, Y, and Z, and sometimes there's some irrational beliefs attached to that. Okay, so you don't want to leave your job. You're not going to change your circumstances. Well, we only have one option then, don't we? We have to learn to cope with this better. We can try to address the individual, try to address the workplace, for example. If that's not going to change, then all you can really do is try to cope the best you possibly can and take meaning from what's happening. But people have always got the choice to change their circumstances. It's whether they can deal with the consequences of changing their circumstances, the uncertainty that might bring them, the change process and the stress that brings, maybe a loss of earnings, maybe a change of career, maybe moving away from one social group to another social group. These are all dangerous things for humans to do, but we can help people to do them if it's the right thing to do them. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So, and that's not avoidance. That's not saying, well, just avoid the things that are difficult to you. It's just that there are some reasonable changes that people might want to change in their lives to change their circumstances, and we can help them to do that. I remember doing an activity. This was a FEPSAC masterclass sort of workshop at the LTA. This is years and years ago now. And Chris Harwood was leading it along with another team of psychologists at FEPSAC. And I went there, I think I was there with sort of Matthew Slater from Staffs Uni and Andrew Evans, who's at Salford now. A bunch of us turned up to this thing to kind of learn some bits and pieces about applied sports psychology. And we were given peer supervision. So as you've experienced when you're doing your training, it's like you've got to counsel somebody and then other people are going to watch. And I was counselling a fictitious athlete who had sustained a late career injury. This is a hypothetical rugby athlete, late career injury. And it was presented to me by this person in a particular way, which was, I've just had enough. I've got other priorities, got kids to think about, and all the rest of it. And I think in setting that activity up, in setting those cases up, the presumption was that the psychologist would convince the athlete that they do have the strength to keep going and they can continue playing and all the rest of it. Whereas my approach using the REBT went completely the opposite way. Okay, let's help you to transition out of the career. And it kind of took people by surprise, including me, but I just went where the conversation was going. So you're using that person-centered idea, but then you're also kind of helping to endorse the unconditional self-worth. Well, this is just something you've been doing for a bit. Yeah. You can just go and do something else for a bit now. Doesn't mean anything about you, your self-worth, your purpose, your value as a human being. You've done this for a bit. You've had enough of it. Would you be tempted to come out of this? Yes, I would actually like to come out of this sport. Okay, well, we can help you to do that. So it's sort of like having that philosophy opens people up to lots of different choices and options. They can change their ways. They can do things for a while and then not do them, and then come back if they want. This idea that you're doing this one thing and it's everything that you are, so you have to keep doing it, just constrains people and constricts people. You as a psychologist can help them through that unconditional self-acceptance to understand there's different ways of being. You're never one thing.
And I really like how
it's a bit of a tangent.
No. I think that's what we're here for. I think that's the benefit of like having these chats in person, because we can go on these tangents, and it just shows. I'm going to go on one now. How REBT feeds into other areas.
You need a button, like it need a sort of a tangent button.
A tangent button, like footnote.
Yeah.
Verbal footnote. So sidebar. Like, I'm really interested in this, the notion of passion, Valorant's work.
Yeah, you've mentioned that. Yeah, it's good.
Obsessive passion. Like, one of the key characteristics of this is when the activity defines the person, and therefore the individual plays certain contingencies on themselves. So I must do well at playing tennis because I am a tennis player,
Right.
something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And that might make the transition out of career like really difficult.
tough, yeah.
Like, what am I if I'm not doing
I
this?
think they call it identity foreclosure. We've done a little bit of work around this.
It's
Yeah.
so interesting, and I'm just fascinated by this. And whereas if the activity now defines us, I think this is where this philosophical notion of self-acceptance is kind of socialized in people, like, oh, but you're a tennis player, you're a football player, whatever it may be, so you have to do this. Then it's, you don't only have to do this, you have to do it well. Well, what happens if I get injured? What happens when I retire? Like, and we know that people experience lots of distress when they experience these kind of A's of retirement or injury or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And so it's not healthy. And I think that people think it's some sort of like Faustian trade where it's like, okay, I know I'm probably going to experience some discomfort if I get injured or have to retire or whatever it may be. Oh, but it'll make me good at doing my activity if I hold that position. Whereas what we've known and what we've discussed today is, well, actually, that's not the case. It that's counterintuitive. It would actually be more beneficial for you not to hold this position.
Yeah. And kind of wrestling people away from their position sounds like it's a kind of an aggressive, active thing. But
I think inviting people,
but sometimes it's a wrestle for them because they've had this idea of the world and themselves for a long period of time, and to an extent, it served them, or they perceive that it served them. Maybe it has served them, that's fine. But they've landed in a position where it's not serving them anymore. And it's hard to change people's philosophies. These are deeply kind of, a lot of the times they're sort of tacit, they're sort of embedded. I mean, these aren't things people tend to hold lightly. This is a core part of, they see it as a core part of who they are, the way that they think. So encouraging people to change that is no easy process. And something as deep rooted as this in society is, again, quite difficult. But all we're doing is appealing to people's sense of empiricism and logic. Does this really make sense to assume that your worth is diminished based on a behaviour, an action, a performance? Is that really how it works?
Interesting.
And often you have to flip the perspective to get them to understand that. So, okay, somebody around you, your kids failed, are they worthless? Of course they're not. Well, why would you believe it about yourself if you're not then willing to believe it about this other human being who's as equally human as you are? Sorry to cut you off.
No, not at all. I was trying to cut you off. I think it's that for me, that's the crux of the matter. There, so we might not impose this on other people; we impose it on ourselves. And that's where, as a practitioner, I find you might kind of invite someone, challenge someone to think differently, and you can see the discomfort. You see, we call this cognitive dissonance.
You know, you're doing it right when you see that.
Oh my, absolutely. That's where the change happens.
Yeah.
And one thing that we speak about, the appeal of REBT, is because you're trying to invite this cognitive and philosophical change. You see the dissonance in people, and you keep going with it. You let them stay in that discomfort.
Yeah.
And that discomfort is because, wow, like, you're challenging my beliefs, like my schemas of the world, this is how the world is, and saying, is this true? And because they know it's not, because it isn't.
That's the dissonance.
Yeah, that's the dissonance. And that's where we see the change happening.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I also think that, this piece around acceptance, what we're not saying is you just accept everything passively. You mentioned this at the top of the episode. You're not just accepting everything that happens to you passively. You're not just becoming a target for adversity. It's the self that you're accepting. It's unconditional self-acceptance. It's not unconditional acceptance of everything. But, we mentioned referring to another person or changing the perspective. And would you consider this young person or the person next to you to be completely stupid or worthless when they make a mistake? And no, you wouldn't. Well, some people do. So unconditional other acceptance is about, can you accept people around you despite their clear limitations? And some people are able to see other people's limitations more than they are their own. So what you sometimes would see is, I have conditional acceptance, but I think everything I do is brilliant, so I'm brilliant. Whereas everything they do is not up to scratch, and it's not up to standard, and they're idiots. And so you have to flip the perspective again the other way, to say, okay, let's interrogate the idea that you're brilliant. You see what I mean? Because that's a fragile position to be.
Absolutely.
It's zero sum because you're either brilliant, and if there's one slight crack, then you're not brilliant. And that's heartbreaking for people who have that belief. It's zero sum. There's no, you talk about this sliding scale, there's no flexibility in that because it's totalistic. I'm amazing, I'm brilliant.
Well, here's the thing as well. It's, you might be very, very good, and you might be right most of the time, and and perform well most. You're a fallible human being. Like we've mentioned before, you could be Roger Federer. You're gonna double fault at some point. Like that's happened. So we know that people are going to make mistakes. And interesting, what I found is the people who I've spoken to that are very judgmental of others and tend to hold themselves in high regard. Oh, I'm brilliant. It's other people that are the problem. I actually find that those are the people that they actually experience the most discomfort when something does go wrong. Because like you said, it's hard to double think that. If I'm judging everyone else for being an idiot, well, now I've made a mistake. I can't just turn my thinking around. It's really hard to do that.
Yeah, but also it frees you up to have better relationships with people, to accept others, to never assume that anybody is worth less than the default status of just not having any worth to begin with. None of us human beings are worth anything. So there's no need for me to discriminate against you or to treat you in any other way than as just a normal, fallible human being. So there's a social aspect to that. Social psychology isn't very big in REBT, but it's actually in there, and it's partly through this. One of the things I started to understand more and more was the social utility of an unconditional acceptance. Well, it means I accept you and therefore can interact with you. I don't need to avoid you or be aggressive towards you. And I might learn something from our interaction. And that stems from, I think, acceptance of the self and recognizing, again, within REBT, which is borrowed by the self-compassion people, the common humanity. We are both fallible human beings. So if I accept myself, I can accept you. I can sort of extend that to you,
I think that relates. Not you mentioned the GABCD framework. I don't think we got to the D actually. Maybe we'll have time later on. But the G is really important here. I've asked you this before. So we've mentioned about how we take kind of personal responsibility, and how the A is like, well, the A hasn't made you feel like that exclusively. Of course, the A is important.
It contributes.
But it contributes. Exactly. It makes a contributory kind of aspect to it. Here's my point. So now we can turn this around. I'm playing devil's advocate here. And I know what your response is going to be, but I'd love the listeners to hear it. How about I say, so if the A isn't responsible for somebody's reaction to something, well, I can be as nasty as I want. Like, that's your problem. So I can deliberately hurt your feelings or say something hurtful to you or treat you poorly. And now that's your problem, mine. How do we... I think that relates to the G. I'm not sure if that's where you'd go to in response to that, but
I'll go in two places when you kind of bring that up. The first place I'll go to is if we're able to reverse this trend and to teach people that it's not what happens to you that generates emotion. It's how you think about the things that happen to you. Then I strip you of your motivation to harm me. Because if your motivation to harm me is to make me feel bad, but you know that that's not how the mind works, then what's your motivation to harm me? You can't make me feel anything. So there's no point in you even trying, because that's not how the mind works. Now that's going to take school level education, which we don't do. It's not there. And I know every discipline probably has their kind of this should be taught at schools thing, but having experienced this being taught at schools and seeing the impact of it, I think it could be quite significant. Where do your emotions come from? Well, they don't come from the stimulus. They come from your reaction to the stimulus. Okay, so if my intention is to hurt you emotionally, then it doesn't matter how I treat you. It's not going to work. So you see how on the one side, it means I can get away with anything, but I strip you of your motivation to do that to somebody because you're not going to have the reaction that you want to have.
So theoretically, absolutely.
Yeah.
Again, playing a little bit of his devil's advocate, I don't buy into that. I do think that how I act, I don't buy into that school
But
of thought.
if as a reaction to that, you don't get the rise from me,
I might not do it again.
You're looking for the reaction. You're looking to hurt me. You don't buy into this whole concept, but you try to do something to me and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
I can strip you of that motivation by not giving rise to it. We can educate children around this so that they understand, okay, well, that's not how the mind works. So if I'm looking to cause harm to somebody, then, it's not just I'm not in control of your emotions. So there might be less point in me treating you in that way. And then when I do treat you in that way, you don't respond as I wanted you to respond. So what's the point in me treating you badly?
I guess my kind of point here would relate to self-acceptance, but not necessarily just of the self, but of others and the situation, in that we might hold moral shoulds. I don't think that people should treat each other in X way.
Yeah.
And this person does. But then it's my belief that everyone should hold these same moral standards. Whereas, it might be true that it would be better if people did, or it would be nice if people did, but it's certainly not true that they have to. And then I can kind of have that negative emotion of frustration that happened. But again, it's that, is that going to help me? So what's my goal here? If my goal here is, well, I'd like this person to stop, is me getting really, really angry.
But your goal, why would you want them to stop?
Yeah.
Because you feel a certain way.
Because I want to feel better.
So if your goal is to feel better, then the route to that is changing B.
Yeah.
Now, then you might say, but how that person is acting is immoral and it's not right. So I'm going to try to change it. But the motivation to change it is a moral standard, a social standard, not an emotional standard. That's the point I'm always trying to make. If your motivation is to feel better and you're seeking to change A, then that's not the appropriate motivation.
That's such a key point to get across, and I think it really relates to acceptance, other acceptance, and situation acceptance.
We have social standards, we have moral codes, we have laws. We should encourage people to keep to those things, and we should challenge them if we feel bold enough to do so. We have a social responsibility to do that. In workplaces, we have codes of conduct, which means it's your responsibility to also do that. We've all done the training of health and safety and all those things. There is a responsibility there within you. But none of that is motivated by feelings. At least it shouldn't be. Because if it is, then you're going to just exhaust yourself trying to change everything around you, and you'll fail because it's impossible, and you're barking up the wrong tree. So, you see what I mean? So there's this reminds me of the discussion we've had around can't stand versus won't stand. So I can't stand it when Stu treats me like he thinks I'm an idiot. I cannot stand it. I cannot tolerate it. Okay. Well, I obviously can, because it's happened and I'm still here. I'm still alive. I still exist. But what I'm really saying, in terms of from a functional perspective, is I won't stand it. So I can stand it because I have stood it. So it's provable that I can stand it. That's a position of confidence. Of course, I can tolerate what Stu's doing, but I would choose not to, and I'll try to address it and try to change that and appeal to your sense of morality, or even appeal to the codes of conduct that are within that organisation. When I say that I can't stand something, that's to me, it's a position of confidence. I'm saying I'm not confident that I can tolerate something. So it's different to will stand and won't stand. This is more of a choice. It leads to action. So I know we're talking about unconditional self-acceptance here, but when we're talking about addressing A, you're better off being in a position of can standing, but choosing not to. Rather than can't stand.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, so these guys end up, these guys, the authors wrote this paper, end up giving us some nice definitions of USA through interviewing 10 professionals. So they've asked these 10 professionals from different backgrounds, what do you think about self-acceptance? They have a bunch of really useful questions that they ask these professionals, and we end up with some definitions. And people can we'll put the reference in the description. People can access this paper. It's a really nice read. But there's a couple of these definitions that I wanted to talk about because it might round off this conversation nicely. Okay, the first one is USA, unconditional self-acceptance, involves considering oneself beyond one's accomplishments and failures. It is to understand that one's self-worth is not dependent on the approval, love, and respect of others. And the thing is, in all these conversations, Stu, we it's very cerebral. It's like philosophical and all the rest of it. But for a person to really endorse this is genuinely life-changing. To just imagine yourself not basing your sense of self-worth on anything people do to you or any of your experiences of success and failure. How resilient that makes you to adversity in across all walks of life. It is really life-changing for people when you see that flip happen. It's something that was, I wouldn't say it was, I would say that the more I've studied REBT, the more I think this is the most important aspect of it. When I initially studied it, it was all about must and demands, and because that feels like the headline for REBT, and it's really important. Don't get me wrong. This feels like the core part of REBT, and it is particular to REBT. It's not necessarily shared across other approaches. So it's genuinely life-changing for people, and we can go on tangents and talk about it all day. But for somebody to endorse the idea that I just have a block of worth because I'm human, or worth doesn't exist in humans, I just am human. That is such a solid thing to break. For them to take that through life with them means that they are resilient to failures and rejections and just the many things you experience in life. You just generate that resilience. In your context, working with referees, how would that manifest? Because I'd imagine that as a fan, you would not like to think that a referee would unconditionally accept themselves after they've made a mistake.
Absolutely. So we hear this all the time. We hear, we just want them to take accountability for it. Whereas actually, I wonder what people mean by that, first of all. So do they want them to feel ashamed, that they've made a mistake? And that mistake may be real, like that happens, or it could be perceived. I think they made a mistake, but they haven't. But whatever, let's assume it's real because it could be true.
Yeah, let's assume the A is true.
Exactly. So they should feel ashamed. Well, first of all, that's the fans' belief of that. Also, is it adaptive then? As a referee, if I'm ashamed that I've made a mistake, is that going to help me not make another one? Yeah, probably not.
It's tricky. It's tricky, that, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, really hard.
Because I do something, I'm embarrassed. I'm motivated to not do it again. It's just possible that embarrassment, which I know isn't exactly the same as shame, that embarrassment could be adaptive, couldn't it? If we're on the healthy side.
If we're on the healthy side, absolutely. So here's the rub. So there's been some research to illustrate that some officials, particularly inexperienced or lower level officials, although it kind of, it gradiates a little bit. But predominantly at the bottom. If they're feeling anxious because they're worried that they're not being perceived as impartial, they will look for opportunities to reward X team, particularly if they feel that the home crowd don't feel that they're giving their team decisions. So a little bit of crowd pressure. I'm now worried that I'm not going to be accepted as an official, so I need to give this team a foul. Now, here's the thing. And we talk about this is why I love what you said about this motivation not stemming from emotions. If an official does that, they think it's going to make them feel better. All right, so now they like me again. But it doesn't, because it's like, well, I don't think I did a good job. So then they start to feel incompetent, and that can kind of manifest itself in that way. I worked with one official who he felt so much demand to be seen as competent by people. And I think that we can relate this back to contingencies. So, I am a referee. So if I don't perform well, like I'm worthless.
Yeah.
So he's definitely associated worth and his self-acceptance on his competence as an official.
Yeah.
So what he wouldn't do was he wouldn't deal with dissent very well. He would almost ignore it. So I don't want to deal with that because it's going to make me feel bad, and how it's going to make me feel bad and affect my worth is that other people might think, oh, well, you're not very good at this because people are dissenting your decisions and you're drawing attention to it. So I'll just ignore it and hope it goes away.
Yeah.
The irony there is observers, coaches, like they weren't promoting him and they weren't giving him favourable evaluations because they're saying you need to deal with this. Like this is your role.
Yeah.
As soon as we kind of challenged this, lo and behold, it's like, I'm dealing with dissent really well. The social validation data we got back was he's a proactive referee now. Like he'll actively kind of try and do the right thing. Now it doesn't make mistakes.
Of course, yeah.
Still going to make mistakes, but what it does mean is he's taking more accountability, and that looks differently from the perspective of the official to the fans.
I can take accountability now because this doesn't mean that I'm less of anything.
Exactly.
I'm free to now do my job outside of the constraints of everything I do has an effect on my self-worth. It's constraining. It means you won't do things that you could be doing because it's dangerous to do it.
Absolutely.
If I do it and fail, it means I'm worth less. Yep. So I'm better not to do it.
And particularly in a role like officiating, because then you mentioned that if I don't do this well, I'm worth less.
Yeah.
And that leads to
worthlessness.
So, okay, let's just assume that, well, that's really good having that perspective because the alternative is if I do it well, then I'm worthy.
Yeah.
Right? And that's going to make me feel great. Do you think many people in officiating go up to the referee after and go, you were brilliant today, ref?
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
So even if that was true, and I'm not saying it is, you're not going to get that payoff that you think you're going to get.
Yes. You're in a fragile position.
Yeah.
100%. Because even wanting that to happen, I want people to say I've done a good job. You're setting yourself up for failure. You know. But this is the other thing that is interesting, that when people start to endorse this unconditional self-acceptance, it has a number of other consequences around approval and I suppose in the broad remit of the perceptions of others about me. It's like, well, it doesn't matter what they think now. Because I accept myself fully, and I know I'm flawed and I'm imperfect, and sometimes I'll do good and bad things. So I don't need your approval anymore. That's something I'm not seeking. And when people get themselves in that position, again, it frees them up to just behave as they want to behave in that environment. And it kind of removes the constraints. The kind of avoidance they've been having of going, well, I'm not going to do that because people might think badly of me. And if they think badly of me, then maybe they're right and I am bad. As soon as you kind of help them to kind of endorse this idea that, well, I'm neither good nor bad, I'm just human and nothing can change that worth, that value, then it doesn't really matter what people think about you, you know? Now, there's a pragmatic piece to this. If you're going for an interview, then obviously the game is that if they don't think well of you, then you're not getting a job. So you're having to play the game all the time, aren't you, to appeal to people in certain situations. But if you can separate what people think of you from your self-worth, then that social interaction has a lot less threat attached to it.
We've either been hanging around too much together.
Well, I refuse to hang around with you. So
it can't be that one. So the other option is that we've just spoken about this too often, because I wrote down here, like, we might need approval for certain conditions.
Conditional must.
There you go. So conditional must might be, oh, Martin's interviewing me for a job. I need this guy's approval if I were to get this job. Now, that's true, or it certainly could be true. So we have to accept it as true. But then this isn't evidence that I must have someone's approval and that I am worth something if this guy... All this means is, if I want to get this job, I need this person's approval. So then we can challenge this. Does this job mean you're worth more? You know, or are you worth less if you don't have it? Like, we can argue that this isn't true, and this would be irrational thinking.
That's it.
Or unhealthy thinking.
There you go. Yeah. Okay.
Lovely place to end it on, I think.
Well,
Oh, I jumped the gun.
You made a mistake there. So now you are worthless.
I don't know what I'm going to do now. I did that on purpose, so listeners would go, it's like, she's an infallible human being too.
Yeah, that old chestnut.
I thought that was a good place to end on, but go on. You want to go on?
It probably was, but I'm going to go on anyway.
Okay.
I just wanted to bring up one more thing, because this is the conclusions that they have on the papers, and that's the first one.
Yeah.
But then, they give us quite a few bullet points around what USA is based on these experts' ideas. The last thing I wanted to pick up here, because it relates to sport quite nicely, I think. USA acknowledges that humans are unique and prone to making mistakes. Thus, rather than dwelling on flaws and failures, the best thing one can do is to accept one's flaws and mistakes. Okay. That's really difficult for performers, because what it feels like, what it seems like you're saying is, it doesn't matter if you make mistakes.
Yeah.
I'll just accept mediocrity.
Or it might erode confidence. I'm going to make loads of mistakes today.
Yeah. Oh well, I'm just flawed. So what's the point? So I think that's a tricky position in performance. However, the key part of this is, rather than dwelling on flaws and mistakes, what is your capacity to move on from a mistake? And especially during a game, during a performance. Now, if you make a mistake and you're constantly thinking about it, what I've seen most often is reaction to mistake being overcompensation. Because I've made a mistake now, that's diminished people's perception of me. So now I need to do something grandiose and do something amazing. So what happens is you try stuff and then lo and behold, it doesn't work. So things get worse. Now you're in a spiral. You're constantly trying to compensate. Your performance is all over the place. You're sacrificing the game plan for your own needs. So really what we're talking about here is the ability to say, well, that wasn't good. Let me get back on task. Rather than saying, no, I'm bad. Now I'm an idiot. Now I'm a complete failure. That wasn't great. That didn't work out. I can evaluate that cleanly and objectively. That was not a good thing to do. Okay, so now I need to get back to doing my job, which is usually doing the basics really, really well. Not overcompensating. What's the game plan? Get back in position, do the next action, next pass, next movement, whatever it is. So it's not saying that just accept it passively and just accept that, mistakes happen, who cares? It's not encouraging you not to care about mistakes. It's saying that there's no need to dwell on those flaws and failures. You are flawed. You are imperfect. Just accept that as true. Anything worthwhile doing is difficult, and therefore you will make mistakes. And it's part of the process of developing as a human being. And I've seen this with the good coaches I've worked with, which I work with a really good coach now, tells that to players. Look, you're not perfect. You're going to make mistakes. But it's making it in the right places and at the right times. It's trying to do something, and then you make a mistake. Great, you know what I mean. So good coaches they're tolerant to mistakes and failures. They don't want them. Of course, they don't want them, and they do everything they can in their power to make sure we don't fail. But they still recognise that is going to happen, and by doing that, it means you can put it out in front of you and saying, well, what do we do with it? How do we react to failure and mistakes? And if you never talk about mistakes and failures and just hope and assume that it's never going to happen, you have no coping mechanisms. As a team, as an individual, you have nothing to react with because you've not set yourself up for it. So I think this is a really important point, that we're prone to making mistakes. And if you think you are perfect, how's the appendix working out for you? How are your wisdom teeth? How's your ulnar nerve, your funny bone? How are your external testicles? How's your blind spot in your vision? Imperfection is baked into you as a human being. So you're going to mess up.
A metaphor that sprung to mind. Do you play poker, Martin?
I don't.
You don't? Okay.
Or was that a bluff?
Oh.
See what I did there? Quite clever, really.
Yeah, do you want to explain that one?
We'll do another episode about that joke.
I'm sure that would be our biggest viewing ratings, I think. So in poker, people call this playing on tilt. So if someone loses like a big hand and they lose lots of money, they then go, right, like the grandiose thing, right? I need to go all in now on the next one, but it might not be the best decision to, you end up compounding your error because you're now playing angry, and you're playing because you're trying to make yourself feel better about losing that other one. Whereas good players and ones that tend to do well are the ones that go, well, that was disappointing, kind of made a mistake there. But go back to basics. Don't let that, like, the game doesn't have a memory. Like new hand.
New hand. It's refreshed. It's interesting analogy, I think.
I'm full of interesting analogies.
I've not noticed that, to be honest. It's not something I would say about you, but whatever. So I think that just about wraps it up. So really interesting paper. Those of you who are inclined to read academic works, this is called Decoding Unconditional Self-Acceptance, a Qualitative Report. Not every piece of literature is full of jargon and is boring, and people can always agree or disagree with research. That's part of the research process. But there is value, and there's lots of value in reading works that help us define concepts and help us discuss concepts, and I think this is one of those. So well done to the authors for producing something really, really interesting. Has helped us to form a conversation around these really core concepts to REBT.
Yeah, anything that's thought-provoking and inspires discussion is contributing to the cause. So therefore it's worthy, and they should feel worthy.
Yeah, I think they should certainly have an enhanced sense of self-worth on the back of this.
I don't think we've taken anything from the paper.
No. It's not what we should be doing. But yeah, thanks guys. Thanks for listening, and see you at the next one. We're going to be doing lots of recording today, so you see this kind of setup over the next few videos. And hope you stay with us and do all the right things on YouTube, like and subscribe, and tell your friends and relatives about this podcast, so we can keep it going and keep it growing.
And help us feel better about ourselves.
Yeah, that's what it's all about.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks everybody. Before you go, a quick reminder. If you're serious about improving your performance or supporting your team's mental edge, check out sportingbounce.com. It's the go-to directory for finding qualified sports psychologists across the UK and Ireland, whether you need in-person support or online sessions that fit your schedule. From building confidence and focus to managing stress and recovery, sports psychology can make a world of difference. So don't leave your mental game to chance. Visit sportingbounce.com today and start your search for the right professional to help you excel. That's sportingbounce.com, your connection to expert sports psychology support. See you in the next episode, everybody.